Is the US dollar losing its worldwide dominance? Are BRIC countries going to take over the dollar using this Chinese yuan? Is the US dollar in danger? Let's find out. Discussions about the de-dollarization have gained momentum in recent years since the war in Ukraine, where countries like China, Brazil, India, they want to find alternatives to the US dollar. And they're picking that currency to be the Chinese yuan. And many people have been, in my opinion, fear-mongering the public about the dangers of the BRICS, even though the potential can be a big change to the United States. You have to give also the data. That way you can meet the expectations of concern about those changes. Because just because China wants to do something, or just because China says something, that doesn't mean they're going to do something. That's the reason of this video. Let's address one of the points that they're breaking. Are BRIC countries going to take over the dollar using the yuan? In my opinion, no, and not even close. The only thing that they're actually doing is their internal trade is happening in the Chinese yuan or in their internal currency, not in dollars, to avoid sanctions. Why are they trying to avoid sanctions? For example, look what happened in the war in Ukraine. Many of the assets that Russia had were frozen, and many of the currency that they had in US dollars was frozen. So they want to find a way to get around it, and they're telling you about this whole thing about the dollar and the Chinese currency, and it's not true. It's not true. When looking here at the data, we can see from the IMF, from the International Monetary Fund, we can see that the US is 58% of the world reserves as of quarter 4 in 2023. The second would be the euro at almost 20%. Then it goes to the Japanese yen. Then it would be the British pound. Then the Canadian dollar. The Canadian, I don't think nobody's talking about the Canadian replacing the dollar. Then the Chinese yen. So when it comes to the actual real numbers, China is not even remotely there. And if you can also take a look in here at the reserves, at the trends from quarter of 2022 to quarter of 2023, they're actually on a downturn. As you can see here, it's not a big downturn, but you can see it went from 287 billion to 261 billion. The most recent number, we don't have them, even though this data has been updated as of last month. So we probably have to wait a little more so we can confirm. But we have the report here from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, where you can see the current usage in cross-border payments in different currencies. That way we can get a better range how often the Chinese yuan is used versus the US dollar, even in Asia. At the beginning of this report, we can see that the cross-border payment, it is dominated by the US and the euro. As the end of 2021, the US dollar accounted for 40% of cross-border payments, followed closely by the euro, then the British pound, the Japanese yen, the Australian dollar, the Hong Kong dollar, Canadian dollar, and then we have the Chinese yen around 2.5%. Again, the numbers are very low for a currency that is expected to replace the dollar. Currently, the trends, the numbers are not there. Another important factor that people don't keep in mind is how things are valued on the global market. In the global market, whenever you have a vehicle, you have a set price for the vehicle. And across the international commerce, this is mostly valued in dollar, as this report shows. Meaning, let's simplify. Let's say a banana is $10. They're saying a banana is $10. They're not saying a banana is 100 Chinese yen. Those are things that are also influence the market. That is also to point out in this report. And for me, one of the most important points when it comes to international commerce, we can see that the US dollar has a bigger presence in Asia than the Chinese yen. Meaning, even in your own area, the dollar predominates in that area. If you go to India, if you go to Indonesia, if you go to Thailand, if you go to the Philippines, most of those countries are more likely to use the dollar as a mean of transaction than the Chinese yen. Therefore, no influence. Another important question on this argument is, does China actually want to become the world currency? Because that's an important part. In order for a country to be able to become the world's currency, they need to be able to incur external debt. Because other countries want your currency, therefore they want to trade using your currency. China currently has a closed system, meaning they have caps on how much money you can actually take out of China. And currently right now it sits around $50,000 a year. Why? Because since they are a capitalist with a communist system, they want to maintain control while having such like a capitalist economy, but with the controls of a communist one, like an authoritarian one. Therefore, they're concerned that if they remove those capital controls, a lot of people are gonna flee the country. So that's another way that they control their elite population in China not to go to Europe or go to other countries, because most of their money is in assets in China. So they definitely want to avoid those things. So that is also important. If China says one thing and they're also making the changes to become a world currency, now we're talking something else. But if they still have those caps, nothing can actually happen. The only thing that we're actually going to see is, yes, trade between Russia and China, that's going to happen, true, but that does not mean they're gonna become just the world currency just because they're trading with Russia. Keep in mind the size of Russia's economy. It's about Russia has the GDP and more or less of the state of Florida, which is a big state, but it's slightly bigger than Florida. So we're not talking about big numbers. When we're talking about the U.S. being used in world commerce, we're not talking about internal trade of the U.S. We're talking about trade externally. If you go to Thailand and you go with the Chinese yen and you go with the dollar, people are going to take the dollar. And it happens in most countries because the dollar has that reputation and has been known for that for years. And to back up the claims that I made regarding the limits and how strict China it is when it comes to sending money by its citizen, I have this report here from the UK National Crime Agency. I'll also provide here the limits that they specify and the controls that they have. In order for China to become a world currency, they need to be able to open these things up, which there's a potential, as I mentioned, that rich people are gonna start leaving China, and China's economy is going to change. In other words, is it possible that BRICS could replace a dollar? Possible? Yes. Likely? No. It's not likely based on the numbers and based on current trends.